views expressed on this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and are not necessarily those of this station, its management, or other advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.
Hi, welcome. This is Dr. John DeMartini. This is one of the most amazing and inspiring shows that you can listen into. If you want to be on the edge of your seats, if you want to open up your heart, if you want to expand your mind, and you want to meet incredible people, stay tuned because you're just about to experience a transformative radio show that will change your life. And you're listening to the Dr. Pat Show that's coming up right next.
The following audio is via a Skype call.
Welcome to the Dr. Pat Show. Talk radio to thrive by. Powerful, inspiring, and coming to you live, bringing you stories of people like you and me, busting through and living life full out. Get ready to dare to wonder what your life would be like if you knew you could not fail. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Dr. Pat Show. Welcome to Transformation Talk Radio, Transformation Network, all of the above. I am really thrilled about today's lineup for a lot of reasons. One is, first off, let me just thank everybody out there for their fabulous emails. And yeah, if you are like me, maybe you found yourself in the middle of the day yesterday crying for no reason. I don't know, Benny. What was yesterday like for you? And off we go here. Eclipse day +1.
There was quite a few, emotional outbursts on my side with my boys, so I might have followed you with that. I don't know what happened. Yeah, it's I think a possibility of what we went through.
It's really fascinating to look at it. We're going to talk to Kabir about that today because one of the things that I've had to learn in my lifetime is how to be in the space and the energy of what is. And I'm finding that, I'm doing that pretty well these days. But I must say yesterday was a really tough day for a lot of people. That I got a text message first thing this morning about a project that I'm part of. And, we're in the process of raising funds. And it's hard sometimes for people to stay in the process and not want to get to that place of trying to make things happen faster than they want to happen or are supposed to happen or all of the above happening and just be in the moment of that. And for you, you got the boys. And when you got the boys, you got to be in the moment of that. I don't know how else you get around that.
Oh, yeah. It's like glue. It never goes away.
I know. And today is a new day. Mm-hmm. And I love this because we're going to talk about what that means. We're going to talk about this idea of mindfulness or the idea of consciousness today. Kabir Helminski is joining me here today as one of the world's most recognized teachers of Sufism. And some people say Sufism, some people say Sufism. Honestly, for me, I just know that there's part of those traditions, that tradition, that for me has helped me understand some of the strangest moments in my life. But here we are today. We're going to be speaking with him about this cultivating presence. Why? Why do we want to cultivate presence? But most importantly, what is it and how do we know we're actually even doing it? Well, if you are he, then one of the things that you might want to talk about is the notion of being in that space, but yet being in the world. Today, we get to chat about his book, which I think is going to open up some doors to help us understand that there is the self, there is the heart, there is the spirit. But what about the creative energy? What about our human capacities? What about that thing in life that's called the essence or potentiality or power of being? That's what today's show is about. Fasten your seatbelts. Here we go. Kabir, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Dr. Pat. I'm very happy to be with you, with all of you.
People have really been in a very interesting space, at least from the connections and the communication I've had about things here in the past 14 years. I'm a girl from the Bronx, and if you were to talk to me growing up about cultivating presence, I pretty much kind of look at you and say, not really sure. Does that mean that I should wait patiently for the subway, or should I try to get myself up in the front of the line?
Well, I grew up not far from you, Pat. I was born in Jersey City. So I know all about the subways and all those connections and the A train, et cetera. I grew up, my teenage years were on McDougal Street in the 60s.
Oh, yeah.
So you can picture that. Yeah.
Well, I can picture that. But okay, let's take a moment in time. If I said something like Cafe Wa to you in the Village, Bob Dylan.
Dave Van Ronk, Bob Dylan, Joan Baez. Sure. Got it.
How did we get here?
Well, that's the big question.
Yes, it
love
is.
brought us here. Yeah, love brought us here. Absolutely. All the way.
Let's talk about this. I want to, there's many things we're going to talk about in the book, but I want to ask you this question. I've heard and I've grown up with and I've experienced that love resides in each and every one of us. Yet it could be the greatest secret that an individual has, having love and not knowing it. I'd love to talk with you about that.
Well, boy, you're jumping in deep immediately. All these universes were created from a spark of love. And I once said to one of my teachers something, and he responded to me, he says, well, do you think love is the goal? I said, well, isn't it? He said, no, it's the cause of everything. So from one point of view, and this may sound kind of like a sentimental lullaby to some people, but I'm absolutely certain of its truth, and that is that love is the cause of all of existence, and the purpose of life is to come to know, perceive, experience how that love is manifesting in every moment, in every detail of every human narrative. And everything is imbued with this mercy. And I don't mean to, by any means, dismiss or marginalize the very real suffering and grief of our lives, which is also real. But even, there's a prayer we say in Sufism, which is, when something really difficult happens, protect me from the harm of it, but let me find the blessing in it. Protect me from the harm of it, but let me find the blessing in it. So there's this mercy, this nurturance, this educating process that's going on so that human beings can gradually experience how at the root of everything is this process of mercy, of love, of goodness being unveiled. But even before we get to that, we have to be really practical and not just be wildly idealistic about this, because people can just blow that off easily enough. But there is a process, there is a human process by which human beings can be led experientially to this and not just be taught it as an idea that they wonder, how will I ever really know that or experience that? And I think it begins with this matter of presence, which again, let's talk. May we talk about presence? Shall we go into that? What's really meant by that? Because presence, first of all, it's more than just being in the present moment, as desirable as that may be.
Right.
It's more than just paying attention. I mean, let's say you were doing in a class of, a theater acting class, and the teacher said, now everybody be present. It means let me have everybody's attention. But spiritually, when we talk about, let me say, psychologically, in terms of consciousness, what we mean by presence is something really specific, and this is where it's so important to begin. If we look at our experience, most of us are, in any particular moment, either caught up in our thoughts, in other words, we're in our heads, or we're caught up in our feelings and emotions, which can be full of contradictions and good and bad. It may be, joy, it may be grief. Or we can be caught up in our bodies. Well, how do I feel? Am I in pain, or is this a pleasure, or am I too hot, cold? Human beings are usually occupying one sort of small part of themselves, and rarely are we a whole. Rarely are we in a state of self-awareness, presence, in other words, that can comprehend all of these things as a whole simultaneously. So what's meant by presence, and what I hope to convey in this book, Living Presence, is the notion that we can develop this slightly higher level of consciousness in which we are, picture a pyramid for a moment.
Yeah.
And at the base of the pyramid, you have thinking, feeling, feeling meaning emotions, and then sensation, behavior, or physical dimension. But then imagine the point, an apex of the pyramid, that is on a plane, on a level above all of those things, and yet can comprehend them, can include them, can experience them. This is what we mean by presence. And you can cultivate that. I mean, just very simply for the listeners right now, I would say, and I'm going to run through this really fast.
Yeah.
I'd like to give it more time, but just to get the idea, you could practice this on your own. First, be aware of your breath. Next, add the sensation of your body. Keep it simple. Let's say just the palms of your hands. You're aware of your breath. You're sensing the palms of your hands. Now, you can also, from this viewpoint, notice thoughts that come in to your awareness. And also, at the same time, let's take sort of like a snapshot of what is your emotional state right now. Is it relatively peaceful, calm? Is it in expectation? Or maybe some people out there are in some emotional discomfort.
Right.
But take a picture of the state of your heart. So imagine putting all these together: breath, sensation, awareness of thought, and a sense of what is my emotional state right now. Just be with for just a moment, especially with the breath. We're all now relatively in a state of presence. We're not just, limited by our thoughts or emotions. So that's it. Now, this can be cultivated in many ways. In a sense, it's more than mindfulness. I mean, with all respect, mindfulness probably goes very deep in some traditions, but it can also be just a kind of, present moment relaxation and stress relief. But imagine mindfulness plus heartfulness, meaning you're not only mindful, you're heartful, you're aware. What is my relationship to the person I'm with at this moment? What is my relationship to you, Dr. Pat? I've never seen you. I don't know you, but I'm going to try and feel that some relationship with you, your longings, your dedication to your work, your sincerity. I'm feeling that. This is heartfulness. And that's all enabled by being in a state of presence where our attention is flexible. It's not just caught up in one thing or another, but our attention is to some extent directed by our will and by conscious choice. And I'm now in a different state as a human being. My attention is my own. I'm able to have a conscious relationship, at least I'm open to it, with you, Pat, right at this moment.
Yeah.
And theoretically with everybody who's out there, because why not? I mean, we are brothers and sisters in spirit, in consciousness, in this human life. So we're all feeling this, God willing, we're all feeling this together. Imagine that just by talking this way, we create a field of awareness for everybody who is listening at this moment. We're all in this presence together. No one is even isolated in just their own presence. But when you awaken your own presence, in a sense, it merges with a greater presence, all of those that we're connected with. So you see the possibilities of this? I mean, I'm cramming a lot into a very short space.
Yeah, here's what I hear you saying, and also, the way that, I read this in the book is that we have this opportunity, and it's called life. And, in the moments that we take that breath in and we take that breath out, there is an absence of time, in a sense. And what I mean by that is I don't stop and say, let me take that breath in, let me take that breath out, let me do it in order for it to fit a time box so that I don't suffocate myself. I don't do that.
Right.
I'm in the presence moment of every breath I take. I have to be. My essence is of that. And I love what you said about mindfulness because, listen, you and I were talking about coming from being born in New York. And there's one thing that I learned in that upbringing and being born from there is a heightened sense of emotions. And why do I say that? I say that because, depending upon where you grew up, in my case, the city was alive. We hear that it's alive. I live in Seattle now, and the city is alive in a different way. But one of the things that I heard you just talk about, but also the book, what you're talking about in the book, is there is this moment of unlimited possibilities that we are actually part of. But if we are not in the idea, the process, Sufism, we're not in the place of cultivating presence. That moment is in front of us, and we are completely unaware of it. And I mean, I'm kind of summarizing a lot of things you wrote in the book, but for me, that was a lesson that I'm still learning and really value and treasure. I don't know. Am I even close?
Yes. I think you've done your homework really well. I would add a little something to it, or say it a little bit differently in this moment, and that is that on the one hand, we are human beings embodied in time, and yet we have a capacity for presence that makes us less governed by linear time and the quantitative time. So we have a capacity in ourselves. I would say that part of us is in an eternal time or timelessness. And from that timelessness, we view the world of time. That's another way of describing presence. Timelessness, viewing time. Because when we're purely in that consciousness is in a certain way outside of time. This may sound like abstract philosophy, but for me it truly is experience. And so from that, let me put it another way, and this is really important. Every human being not only has this life and its circumstances, which may be pleasant or unpleasant or wonderful or terrifying. The circumstances are always changing, but we also have, and I say this with absolute with conviction and certainty, that we as human beings, through consciousness, through our own spirit, have access to a state of being beyond circumstances. Make sense? A state of being beyond circumstances. And in that state beyond circumstances, we're okay. There is well-being. There is something there that is blessed, that is conscious, that is, in a sense, undisturbed, and even invulnerable in that pure, deep state. Now, this state is not, I realize most people cannot just say, snap their fingers and be in that state automatically. But if we do the spiritual work with consistency, in other words, if we practice meditation, contemplation, mantra, chanting, zikr, as we say in Sufism, remembrance of God, And if we worship, and by worship I mean not formal church-going worship necessarily, but a state of reverence for being. If we practice these things more and more, that part of us that is beyond circumstances will become real to us.
One of the things I love that we're talking about too is, and I know you're going to talk about this today as well, as we hear things like cultivating presence, right? And it's almost as if that was for people like thousands of years ago. But tell me how I can learn from this today. And that's the $650 million question, isn't it? Because there is the answer to that. I mean, isn't it this integrated spirituality, let's just call it? I like to call it spiritual harmony. But it is this that perhaps could provide answers to what we call a world of chaos. I don't know.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Well, it's right. This is not something archaic and something of the past. In fact, it's the need for it is more urgent than ever, because to the extent that we live in an artificial, technologized reality, and we're no longer like, our ancestors probably were mostly agricultural people, or at least close to nature, for millennia. And people were living in a more natural environment. And in that natural environment, presence is a bit more natural. It's not automatic, but you're less, at least, distracted, less living in a state of continual stress. So in today's world, in order to balance the challenges to our humanness, presence is the foremost remedy. It's urgently needed. And because, I believe humanity is facing a choice of futures. Are we going to face a human future or a non-human future? And our very humanness needs reinforcement. It needs awakening, so that we don't just become machine-like as so many things around us. And all of this talk of artificial intelligence and Ray Kurzweil's stupid, if I may say so, idea of conscious machines will never be conscious because they have no soul, and consciousness is soul. And so but human beings can become machines. Machines can never become human, but humans can become machines, unfortunately. And in fact, there are many forces operating on us that make us more robotic, less heartful. And tyrannies run on this. Bureaucracies sometimes run on this. But there's such an urgent need to awaken our humanness, and the essence of our humanness begins with this presence and ultimately leads to heartfulness, and the heart is infinite, and what the heart can open us to is infinite. And that's yet an even bigger subject.
Yeah.
But it begins with presence.
Yeah, I mean, this is the conversation. It really is, something that we look at and we have a notion about. Now, many of us have gone through many different aspects of life. Some that cause us joy, and we have this idea that the external environment causes us, right? You like that phrase? I lost my job. Therefore, A, B, C, D, E, F, G about how depressed I am. Or, yes, I have lost a loved one. And of course, I'm grieving. But how does that become now the story of my life or not? And I want to take a short break. When we come back, I would love to talk with you about looking at these traditions. I mean, tradition of Rumi, looking at Sufism, and ask ourselves the question, how is it that we are able to have a notion of understanding about heart, but yet one of the most difficult challenges we have is to implement it in our day-to-day life and in the world. When we come back, I would love to talk with you about cultivating presence that can cultivate our humanness and the idea of spirituality and love. Let's take a short break. We'll be right back.
When I was 6 years old, I broke my leg. And I was running from my brother and his friends, and tasted the sweet perfume of the mountain grass.
Be you plus live your purpose equals joy. That's the motto of Unstuck Joy with Vicki Todd. Vicki believes you were born with gifts that are meant to make the world brighter. Each show will feature an art visioning journal prompt to help you create your way to soul clarity. If you're ready to get unstuck and create more joy, this show is for you. Tune in every month on Transformation Talk Radio. For more information, visit VickiWorldArt.com.
A word of caution: if you prefer the status quo and you are not interested in improving every aspect of your life, this book will trigger the shift out of you. The Truth is Funny, Shift Happens is available now. Author Colette Steffen brings the powerful knowledge and life-changing energy and empowerment from the radio airwaves to the pages of her new book. To get your copy in paperback or ebook, visit thetruthisfunny.com today.
Brand consultant Jen Morgan is here with Radically Distinct Radio to help you take control of your future and maximize your brand's power to produce results. Whether you're an individual trying to reinvent yourself and launch a new venture, or you're an executive trying to reposition your company to modernize your sales and marketing programs, Jen Morgan and the RAD Method empower you to play to your strengths and show up in the world as your most powerful brand. To learn more, go to jenmorgan.com. That's Jen with 2 N's, Morgan.com, or call 206-972-5366.
TheAngelLady.net. 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 1-800-323-1790. 1-800-323-1790. Sue Storm. TheAngelLady.net.
Isn't it time to put your health first? To give yourself the gift of whole body wellness? What if embracing unconditional love and self-care was the first step to wellness? Could you honor that for yourself? My name is Audrey Michelle, host of Rewired Life Radio and the author of Rewired Life, A Journey to Untangle Chronic Pain and Endometriosis. In my book, I share how I healed from 17 years of chronic pain and disease. Get your signed copy at audreymichelle.com/book, spelled MICHEL.com/book.
Amber Teal, founder of The Healthy Edge, is bringing you the hit show Healthy Edge Radio, living with power, passion, and purpose. Amber provides the support and tools necessary for you to finally release the weight and emotions that are hidden beneath the weight. Tune in each month on Transformation Talk Radio. For more information on how you can take the next step with Amber, visit getthehealthyedge.com.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. You're listening to the Dr. Pat Show, Transformation Talk Radio. And, today we're talking about cultivating presence, the hows and whys. Kabir Helminski joining me here today. And Benny, we have 3 copies of the book to give away. I think it would be really good to go ahead and do that right now. First caller, let's go ahead and do this because I know like Kabir and I just going to get going here and losing track of time as usual. 1-800-930-2819. 1-800-930-2819. We'd love to give first copy away, and then we'll just go right through. Kabir, thank you so much for today. there is, and you and I were kind of talking during the break, there are new energies around what it means to be spiritual in the world. And I'm not just talking about Sufism or other traditions. I'm even talking within the ranks of Christianity, especially here in the United States. But the question really is the idea of spirituality, the idea of talking about being spiritual is very different than decades and decades and decades and decades where we put this box around what we believe. And I wanted to start this out by asking you, when we think about Sufism, what would you say is one of the greatest misconceptions or one of the greatest misbeliefs the world might have about it?
Well, honestly, I think we don't really understand very much about Sufism at all. And so perhaps if I try to say a little bit about what I've experienced through my own tradition, which is Rumi's tradition, what it's actually like when you meet the actual practice rather than, for instance, just reading some ecstatic poems of Rumi's. People have read, so some of the really obvious misconceptions are that Rumi was writing a kind of very energized, mystical, sometimes almost erotic love poetry. That's one misunderstanding. And because Persian poetry used the language of sensuality, of romantic love as a metaphor, because God is the beloved for the Sufi, and that devotion to the divine is what it's really about. It's about our need. It's about our need for the divine, what's called the beloved sometimes. In the West, we are so individualistic that we see, maybe we've rejected dogmatic religion for good reasons, because much of it I would call man-made religion and not something that the divine really offered us, but human beings have theologized and conceptualized and created man-made religions, man-made beliefs. We might as well get rid of a lot of that. But, there is still I would say at the heart of Sufism is the recognition that we need this relationship with the divine. Now, what is the divine? It's not a dualistic conception where there's God and me, and God is the beloved, and I'm the lover. And on the one hand, that language is used, but in Sufism there's a profoundly non-dual understanding as well. In other words, we could put it this way, that every human being is a hologram of the all, and that all is the divine, and we are a hologram of that divine totality, and in a sense, nothing else exists but God, but Allah. And Allah for us is not the God of Islam. Allah is the reality, that whole non-dual reality. So we need to experience that and realize our profound need to be blessed, guided, nurtured by this infinite love, which we can find it in our own hearts. Not that it's isolated as a thing in our individualities, but through the heart, it's as if we open a window to the infinite. So one of the things about Sufism, opening a window to the infinite, to really do that requires a profound humility. In other words, to make that connection, there needs to be a devotion, a love of this beingness. Being sounds abstract, but in fact, what we mean by being is anything but abstract. It's rather hyper-personal. It's like the God you prayed to when you were a 4-year-old child, in all sincerity, the divine is that and much more. And so Rumi was intoxicated with this. Rumi was not just in some highly energized, ecstatic state of individual consciousness. No, Rumi was melted, dissolved in this totality, this of divine being, this ocean of divine beauty, and he wanted everybody to know that, and he wanted to share that. So it is the rejoining of the part with the whole, and it is a profoundly non-dual experience, and yet we have the best chance of attaining that is not through strategizing to become a more conscious person, so that's a good start. It is something more about melting into this divine reality without necessarily, losing our individuality. The paradox is that it's not an either-or situation, but it's a both-and situation. And I feel like reading something from some Rumi, just a few lines.
Please, yes.
And this is at the prologue of Book 3 of Rumi's Matnawi. So it's like an introductory part in which he's talking about the sciences of wisdom. And he says, so wisdom and knowledge is necessary in this process. Don't ever think, Rumi is telling us, you need knowledge to attain love. Because if you don't have the right knowledge, you won't really know what's truly worthy of your love. You'll fall for the imitations of love. You'll make idols out of something less than that complete divine love. So he says the sciences of wisdom are God's armies by which he strengthens the spirits of the initiates and purifies their knowledge from the adulteration of the ignorance and purifies their justice from the adulteration of the bias and purifies their generosity from the adulteration of ostentation and their forbearance from the adulteration of foolishness and brings near to them whatever was far from them in their understanding of the hereafter, and makes easy to them whatever was hard for them in respect of obedience and energetic endeavor. So he's speaking to the human being, and he's saying that, in a way, you could summarize this by saying, okay, he strengthens the spirits of the initiates, he removes the ignorance from their knowledge, he removes bias from their justice, he removes ostentation from their generosity, he removes foolishness from their forbearance, and this divine, or these sciences of wisdom, help us toward obedience, by which he means really awareness of spiritual laws, awareness of how things really work, and makes our endeavor energetic. He energizes this quest that we're on. So this is just one little snippet of his 20,000 lines, but you feel the power in this, the beauty in this, the incredible urgency and need to be infused by this divine energy, rather than to be always, in a sense, approaching this more individualistically or egotistically as a strategy for my own ego to be a more conscious, maybe a more ecstatic person. Westerners especially are so conditioned by this egoistic perspective that we have a hard time ever seeing from the divine perspective. And what I mean by that is, one of the earliest lessons I was taught on the spiritual path, this is kind of very subtle, but my teacher said, walk out into nature and allow yourself to be seen by Allah. Now, what I experienced in that was I had been looking exclusively through my own perspective at everything, and my presence was somewhat limited, and I could only see things through the viewpoint I had. Here was a chance where my own viewpoint, while not completely lost, somehow was expanded so that I could allow myself to go out and, in a sense, be seen. The trees were seeing me, the clouds were seeing me, and I became just, this aspect of the landscape, and this wider vision unfolded, and this greater awareness unfolded. And at the same time, this ultimately led to an experience of being loved by this greater field of being. And that, this individual being called Kabir Helminski, full of his own contradictions and limitations and fears and inadequacies, could experience being loved by this infinite divine something. And that was a huge shift. And having experienced that, then what was left of my individuality longed to kind of be worthy of that, longed to kind of do the work, to serve, to be worthy of that experience, and to not lose that experience, not forget it. Make sense?
It does. And, one of the things I wanted to ask you about and talk with you about is when we're able to be in that presence, to be in that space, let's just call it that, to be in that space. I'm reminded of, individuals like Viktor Frankl. And I'm reminded about what is it about him that was so unusual or different from the capacity that any of us might have. And when we really look at that and we look at, what it was he did in a concentration camp, how he was able to create a different perspective, the thing I'm struck by is that it does go beyond the mind and mindfulness. And so, we live in a world, in this country at least, we live in a world where we do have hardships, but we don't have to become our hardship. And, the question that I think I want to ask you about has to do with, Sufism in a modern day world, and what it is that we could know and experience, and also, most importantly, I think, practice, to be at a place where we truly get the magnitude of a love presence.
Yes. Well, the way this is done, there are a number of ways this is done in the Sufi tradition. It begins with something we call adab, which is spiritual courtesy. Believe it or not, in Rumi's tradition, perhaps the foremost practice is not, hours and days of deep contemplation, though we do that too, but this refinement of manners, of courtesy, of how you treat other human beings and even the material world. Everything is done with this huge respect for every human being and everything. Even when a Sufi picks up a teacup, they subtly kiss the cup before they even sip it, or they put on a cloak and you kiss your cloak, and you walk on a carpet, you bless the carpet because it's in service to you. So it all begins with this adab, this spiritual courtesy, which is also demonstrated to the teacher because of their function of serving the teaching, and it's demonstrated to your fellow Sufis, dervishes, fellow seekers, because you've all been brought together by a common yearning. So this kind of moderates egoism a lot. So that's one practice. Another practice is the constant, another very important practice is remembrance of God, which is done through the divine names in the simplest way. It's done through, chanting the names of God, whether it be Allah or Ya Nur, which means God who is light, or Yah Wadud, God who is all-loving. So by invoking the divine names, you invoke the reality of those names. When you say Ya Latif, which means God is subtle and beneficent, you say Ya Latif 1,000 times, and the reality of the ways in which God is subtly beneficent becomes real to you. So you enter into this realm, this qualitative realm that is beyond the usual, rough and tumble, egotistical human world, let alone the commercial consumer world. You enter into this other dimension of divine qualities, and that becomes real for you, and you even begin to see this life as the manifestation of divine qualities. And then finally, I'll add one more aspect of the practice, and I'm really simplifying this a lot for today. It is the continual warriorship with the ego. It's observing your own false self. By ego, I mean, in this case, I mean false self. We will never be without some sense of I, but that sense of I can, at the lowest level, be a tormented, addicted, enslaved self. At another level, moving up higher, it can be a healthy, integrated, positive self, which is a good thing to have.
Yeah.
And then, but at a much higher level, the self becomes something so subtle, so inclusive, that a self at that level looks into another's eyes and sees their own self in the other's eyes. But there's always a sense of I. But what kind of I is it going to be? In Sufism, we talk about 7 different levels. I've given you sort of 3 points on that scale, from a tormented, enslaved self up to a self that is so subtle that it is inclusive and not oppositional, and feels its immediately senses its unity, senses the oneness, because it's been through a process of purification. And the way you get there, the way that happens, is through constant warriorship with the false self, examining our motives, not living a life where the main purpose of our life is to satisfy every craving and every demand of that false self for attention, for prestige, for privilege, for pleasure, for control of the environment. Little by little, dying to all of those things, but dying in love, so that the self that is in that state of love, which is your true being, your true I, your real I, your essential self, can emerge and begin to live life for you, rather than having your false self, tyrannize your heart.
Yeah.
And I'll say one. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, so I'll say one more thing that is really important, because I have another book called The Knowing Heart, and it was written after Living Presence. So Living Presence just came out in its 25th anniversary edition, which I'm very happy about. It was rewritten and so forth. But the other book is called The Knowing Heart. Knowing heart, meaning the heart is our most important instrument of knowing reality. And to put it as simply as possible, it is through the heart that we know this existence qualitatively. And by qualitatively, I mean sensing value, sensing what's important, sensing relationship, appreciating relationship, sensing the awesomeness of just existence, of just being human, of having been given this faculty of the heart. But the heart is like, think of the heart as a cognitive instrument that perceives a universe of qualities, which is the real universe. The universe is not just as even quantum physics would propose. It's not just a world of quantities and energies, and even as amazing as that is, but we are simultaneously living in a qualitative universe, which is the dimension through which we sense value. And the more the heart is awake, the more the heart is purified, the more it lives in a reality that is so full of meaning and beauty and value and preciousness and tenderness and all of the richness of human relationships and memories and creativity and all of this begins to enhance and fulfill our humanness. So the heart is central to this, and any true spirituality is, I would say, spirituality is what awakens and perfects and purifies the heart.
Yeah.
And the main work has to do with our egoism, our false self.
What I find interesting in the day and age we live in is that we're not just talking about really having that full expression that you just described when life is really great and life is really good. We're not talking about an on and off switch, I don't believe, that says, okay, now let me do this. Let me just turn on this integrative fullness expression of, that part of me that embraces compassion. We're talking about a way of living that has this essence of all of what you just said, regardless of the outside world. Isn't that really what our game plan is, to really learn and become part of a process that enables us to be kind in the face of anger? I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah, because I think it's great that we're all like, having a great time. We're all happy. Life is good. Nothing really going on in our lives. But that's not really life, right?
Right.
Right. And we got to see it play out in our country here a week ago of what happens when anger shows up. And, I can't believe that we've been given our humanness to be that.
Right. And nor in our response to that, nor should our response to that be anger in the sense of rage towards those poor people who are living in that hatefulness. Because how did they get there? These are people who are so wounded. I mean, they're vicious. Let's be clear. That was a vicious bunch of people from all eyewitness accounts.
Yeah.
But how did they get to be like that? How have they been rejected? How have they been wounded? How have they sought this crazy mob to be their spiritual family? You can look. There are some books on white supremacists who have given it up and who have realized and have come out of that and talk about, just the sad state of those souls who feel that hatefulness because, it's a false part of themselves, but they're deeply wounded and they're not going to be, they need to be recognized. And we can't afford to be, it's not going to do any good to be reactive toward them. If we could ever be around such people, it would be our responsibility to somehow be calm, be present, be loving, even in the face of that ugliness, because it's only in that way that they could actually experience the ugly as ugly. Now, I want to say something about remembrance, this is really important because
I want to make sure people know how to get a copy of the book because we got about 2 minutes left here. So I want to make sure that folks know how to get a copy of the book. And then, yes, I'd love to hear your personal message. Thank you for joining me here today.
Living Presence, I guess, on Amazon or any other way you want to order it. It's easy to find. I hope you'll get it and start there. The final word about remembrance of God. The faculty of remembrance of God is something that is sustained through expansion and contraction, through joy and grief. This human capacity can remain conscious through all of these states and strengthen us and heal us and support us and sustain us through all human states. Spirituality is not about expansion alone or joy alone. It's about how we are through all the various changing states of our humanness. But if we can awaken that remembrance of God, then everything has changed. Everything is in a different context. now the context is love's universe and not merely my own ego's reactions and wounds.
Yeah. And boy, don't we light up inside. Thank you for today, and thank you for all that you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share, and God bless you for your work.
Oh, thanks. We're going to take a short break. We are going to continue our conversation about love, the art of powerful love. Stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back.
The preceding audio was via a Skype call.